Earlier, I thought that the more love you show, the more attention you give, the more you satisfy all her desires, the more the woman in your life realizes how lucky she is to have you. I don't think so anymore. Now I believe all these things are just making her take you for granted. They are making her think there is nothing she can't do without you noticing or making excuses for her. Sabrina and I met in our freshman year of college. We started dating, and until the end of our first year, we were in an on and off relationship. We both seemed to really like each other and enjoyed the sex we were having, but neither of us were at the point where we wanted to be in a committed relationship. Halfway through our senior year, we met again, and this time, we stayed together. 6 months after finishing school, we got married. Soon after, my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, and during the party, I found my father alone and asked him how he and my mother managed to stay happy with each other for so long. I pointed out several couples we knew who couldn't seem to go a week without fighting over something. How do you and your mother manage not to be like everyone else? The secret, son, is to tell them every day that you love them, to show them every day that you love them. Never let yourself get to the point where you take it for granted that they know this. Always show it. Show this every day of your marriage. It is so simple. I took his advice to heart, and for the next 7 years, not a day went by that I didn't tell Sabrina I loved her. I never forgot a birthday, anniversary, or any other special event. And I even had a list of crap anniversaries that I used as an excuse to give cards, flowers, and other special gifts. I sent Sabrina flowers to celebrate her first anniversary of making meatloaf and using our new washer and dryer for the first time. I gave her a card for the anniversary of her first promotion at work. No event was too big or too small for me to record and use. She received flowers and chocolates on the anniversary of the first time we had sex. She received diamond earrings in honor of the first time we were intimate. I sent flowers to her office for no reason, just so that in the middle of the workday, she would receive a card that said, "I love you." I did everything I could think of to show her how much she meant to me. I followed my father's advice, but my father used his relationship with my mother as an example. He did not take into account the fact that different women look at the same thing differently. While my mother saw this as a sign of her father's constant love for her, Sabrina saw it as a sign of my insecurity and that I was doing this to beg for her attention. Somehow, my desire to show her my love devalued me in her eyes. I, of course, didn't know this and moved on with my life, knowing that I had a happy and loving marriage. Sabrina and I were successful in our chosen fields. We were both climbing the corporate ladder, and as we progressed, the work required more time, more energy, quite a few late nights, and occasional business travel. There were nights when we didn't even see each other. I would work late and Sabrina would be asleep when I got home, or vice versa. I accepted this as the price we paid for success, and I assumed Sabrina did too. When we were together, I did everything possible to compensate for the time spent apart. The sex was amazing. There were weekends when we didn't even get dressed. Sabrina smiled, told me that she was mine forever, and I, of course, believed it. I found out about this at a Christmas party in her company. It took place at a hotel in the city center. Her company rented a ballroom and several rooms to use as guest suites. The party was on a Wednesday night, and I told Sabrina I'd meet her there. The party started at 7, but I had an out-of-town client. I had to put on an 8 o'clock flight, so I told Sabrina not to wait until 8:30 or so. At the last minute, the client decided to stay an extra day and see the sights, so I arrived at the party at 7:30. I walked into the ballroom just in time to see Sabrina with a man I didn't recognize. But back then, I didn't know most of the people she worked with, having only seen them at picnics and Christmas parties. What I found strange was that Sabrina wrapped her arms around his waist. I headed towards the corridor they had entered, and upon entering it, I found that it was a kind of vestibule, from which 3 rooms branched off. I wondered which room they went into, so I tried the one closest to me and found it empty, as was the room next to it. I was just about to close the door and go into the 3rd room when I heard giggling. It seemed to be coming from inside the room, even though it looked empty, so I went back inside to take a closer look. I heard another chuckle and realized it was coming from the vent in the ceiling. Then it dawned on me that I could hear what was happening in the next room. I walked towards the door to go into the next room when I heard Sabrina say, "Be careful! You don't want to tear your dress, do you?" So, How the hell am I supposed to get to your charms? Here, let me show you. Damn it, Rena. I will never get tired of looking at these beauties. Let me lick those fantastic mounds on your breasts. Oh no, lover, only after you get my toy. You can't play with my charms until I can play with your toy. There was the sound of a zipper being pulled up, and then Sabrina said, "Now there's something I'll never get tired of. Are you sure we don't have time to run into one of the rooms for a quickie? I need you. Very, very necessary. Come on, darling. We had it during lunch, and 3 hours on Monday evening. You can wait until tomorrow." "No, I cannot." "Well, you'll have to. Bob said he would be here around 8:30, and I should be here when he came in. If he comes early and I walk in with a just had sex look on my face, he might get suspicious and start checking me out, and we don't want that. Come on, Rena. If he's as weak as you say, we can do this in front of him, and it won't matter. I know, love. I can just tell him to go home and we'll talk about it when I get there, and then I can convince him that we were just joking and trying to prank him, and he'll believe me. But just because I know I can, doesn't mean I want to open that particular can of worms. Are you sure we can't quickly run upstairs? I don't want to risk it, my love, but I can relieve your stress." There was a pause, and then the man groaned. "Oh God, Rena, you are so good at this. Your mouth is pure magic. I've never been treated so well before." The moaning continued for a minute or two, and then it reached a peak. "Mark will be very angry when I tell him that you relieved my stress, and he will have to wait until tomorrow." "Maybe not. I thought you said we couldn't today." "I said we can't go up to the guest apartment. I didn't say anything about not doing what we just did." "How can you do this? Mark will probably arrive only after your husband. What you and I just didn't take long, baby. I'll introduce you to Bob, and then I'll get up to go to the ladies' room, and while you and Bob are talking, I'll sneak in here with Mark to give him some quick relief." God, Rena, you are just a depraved woman. "I know, lover. That's why you like me." "Are you going to rinse your mouth or kiss your hubby with my taste on your tongue? This won't be the first time he tastes you." "You are a devil, Rena, that's what you are. Evil and vicious. Come on, love, we need to get back to the party." It's amazing how quickly love can die. I went from endless love and affection to absolute hatred in a matter of seconds. All this time, I was fighting with myself. Should I knock down the door and then kick ass, or sit back and use what I just learned to make plans? Should I strike while it's hot, or wait and find out names, dates, and places? If I lash out at them now, it will be a he said, she said situation in divorce court. I could say I overheard, and she could vehemently deny it. I needed more information. Besides, if I had kicked down the door, I might never have known who Mark was, or even if there were any other men besides Mark and the guy in the next room with Sabrina. No, in the end, I will still have time to kick some ass, but it won't be that night. I hurried out of the building and into the car until the time came when I told Sabrina to wait for me. When I entered the ballroom, I saw Sabrina sitting at a table with 2 couples and 1 man. Sabrina is 173 centimeters tall, and the guy she was sitting next to was about 10 centimeters taller, so unless he has very short legs, I guessed he was about 183 centimeters tall. Black wavy hair and thin the crayon-like mustache allowed me to tell that. He was a real good-looking person even before I approached the table. Sabrina saw me approaching, stood up, and stepped back from the table. She opened her arms to embrace me and moved to kiss me with her wicked mouth, but at the last second I turned my head and accepted the kiss on my cheek. I noticed surprise on her face. "I think I'm sick with something, honey. I don't want to pass it on to you." She agreed and then introduced me to the people at the table. The handsome fellow was named Ron, and when he stood up to shake my hand, I saw that I was close in my guesses. My height is 183 centimeters, and we were approximately at each other's eye level. This was only important because I wanted to know his reach when I went after him. We sat down and I started chatting with my wife's colleagues. I felt that the 2 couples were a little restless, as if they were expecting something to happen. I danced 2 numbers with Sabrina, and during the second, she whispered in my ear, "This thing that made you sick won't stop you from jumping on my bones today?" I've been horny as hell all day just thinking about you. Yes, I have no doubt. That's what I thought. I wanted to say, no, Rena, I don't think so, but didn't say. I'd never called her Rena like Ron did, and I wasn't ready to do anything to alarm her yet. So I said, we'll just have to wait and see how things go and how I feel when we get home. Sabrina didn't know it yet, but she would never have sex with me again. When the music stopped and we returned to the table, there was another man sitting there talking to Ron, and Sabrina introduced me to Mark. He is about 83 meters tall and perhaps 82 kilograms. He had soft hands and a weak chin, and I remembered this information. About 10 minutes later, Mark got up to visit the people at another table, and I watched him out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't surprised when I saw him enter the hallway that led to the room Sabrina was already in with Ron. Apparently, Ron had prepared it while Sabrina and I were on the dance floor. After a couple of minutes, Sabrina stood up, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she was going to the restroom. Ron let her walk a few feet away from the table and then asked me what I thought about the Broncos' chances at the Super Bowl. Apparently, Sabrina told him I was an avid football fan, and he would use that to keep me occupied while Sabrina sneaked off to Mark's. While I was talking about football with Ron, I kept an eye out of the corner of my eye on the door through which Mark came out, and less than a minute later, Sabrina entered it. Almost 15 minutes passed before Sabrina returned to the table, and I continued talking to Ron and pretended not to notice how long she had been gone. After she returned to the table, I danced with her again and she cuddled up to me. I'm horny, baby. Very, very horny. Please don't let me down tonight. When we returned to the table, Mark asked Sabrina to dance, and as they walked onto the floor, I saw a smirk on the face of one of the women at the table as she looked in my direction. I remembered the old cliché, the husband will be the last to know about this. Mark brought her back, then Ron brought her out, and I saw the two women at the table smiling knowingly at each other. I put it away in my memory. If it was common knowledge among the people she worked with, then finding out what I needed would be easy. Sabrina danced with a few of the people she reported to, and then sat at her boss's desk talking to him for 15 minutes. When she returned to our table, she whispered, "Okay, lover, they saw me, and I danced with those with whom I was supposed to dance. Let's go home, lover. Be ready for me. I really need it." We were in different cars, and I gave her a good head start. I wanted her to be home, Andra said, and on the bed when I arrived. This way she could experience the full effect of what I had planned. I drove slowly to make sure she had time to become what I wanted. When I got home, I rushed upstairs and through the master bedroom to the closet, where I faked erupting my bowels. I stayed in the toilet making noises for a few minutes and then went to the sink, flushed the water, and wiped my forehead with a wet rag. Drying my face with a towel, I went into the bedroom and saw Sabrina lying naked on the bed. "Sorry, baby. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'll sleep in the spare bedroom tonight and call the doctor in the morning." I saw that she was angry when I left the room. This morning I was up before Sabrina and sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee, trying to look sick, when she walked into the kitchen. "Do you feel better?" she asked. "Not good. I hardly slept." I looked at my watch. "The doctor's office only opens at 8:30. I'd better call work and let them know that I won't be there today." I reached for the phone while she poured herself a cup of coffee and then went to get ready for work. "Don't forget that I'll be late today," she said. "We're still working on that damn budget proposal, which should be ready by next Tuesday." "Yeah, sure," I thought, hanging up without calling. After Sabrina left for work, I got dressed, went to my office, and tidied up the work I couldn't leave unattended, then told my secretary that I had a doctor's appointment and would be gone for the rest of the day. I left the office and headed to the public library. I dug through the directories and soon found the addresses and telephone numbers of Ronald Bragg and Mark Treville. Then, using the library computers, I found information about the company Sabrina worked for. I found the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of all company officers and all members of the board of directors. I checked the backgrounds of senior officials and the chairman of the board to get an idea of how they might react to the scandal, and was pleased with what I found. If I was right, then even the slightest hint of scandal would make Sabrina and her two fellow lovers throw everything into the trash. That evening, I parked near Sabrina's place of work, and when she got out at 10 minutes past 4, I followed her as she drove across town. She pulled into the motel parking lot, got out of the car, and walked up to room 131. She knocked, the door opened, Mark stepped aside and let her in. 20 minutes later, Ron arrived, got out of the car, and walked towards room 131. I could only assume he was there too to attend the budget meeting. I was wondering if Sabrina's company values the fact that their employees work on the budget on their own time and at their own expense. I could be wrong. One of them could have submitted an expense report to the meeting. Yes, exactly. I wrote down the make, model, and license plate of Ron's car and drove home. Along the way, I thought about what else I had learned about Ron and Mark. Both were married, but I could not understand whether they were happily married or not. All I could figure out was that none of them were at the office party. I needed to find out more about them and maybe involve them in my plot to blow it on Sabrina, Ron, and Mark's asses. I also thought about some things that I hadn't noticed before. For example, Sabrina always worked late on Mondays and Thursdays. I never doubted her when she told me that Mondays were dragging on because they had to deal with all the problems that arose over the weekend. She worked late on Thursday because that was the day they had to finish all the reports that were due on Friday. Why did I trust her? I was stupid in love when it came to her. I just now realized how stupid I am. I was lying in bed reading when I heard she came home. I turned off the light, put the book aside, and pretended to be asleep. She opened the door, looked in, then closed the door and went into her bedroom, and a few minutes later, I heard the shower running. That night, sleep was not easy for me. I lay there looking at the ceiling and tried to figure out how I could destroy all three of them at the same time and kill them. It had to be all three of them at once because I didn't want any of them to see that something had happened to the others and take steps to protect themselves. After it's done, I'll let them know who did it, and knowing that, they'll know why. And then it dawned on me. I sat down, turned on the light, and picked up the book I was reading. It was a mystery about the murder of a man who was framed. He was convicted based on planted evidence, and a lawyer and private detective frantically tried to prove his innocence before he was executed. This will be enough, I thought, putting the book down and turning off the light. Now that I knew what to do, I fell asleep and slept like a baby. On Friday morning, I told Sabrina that the doctor had diagnosed me with stomach flu, and that with medication, it should go away. I'm still a little weak, but he says I should be strong enough to go to work on Monday. He doesn't want me to do anything other than relax this weekend. Sabrina touched my cheek. Rest and gain strength, my love. You will need it. I was left out, and will need to make up for everything. And then she left for work. After getting dressed, I left the house to do more research. By the end of the day, I learned that Ron's wife was a lawyer's secretary and that she was not at the party because she was out of town visiting her sick mother. Mark's wife is selling real estate, and she missed the party because she was trying to close a deal on a $2 million real estate deal. Both marriages seemed stable, but I guess that was because neither woman knew what their husbands were doing. I will fix this, and very soon. After spending a relaxing weekend at home, I told Sabrina that I felt ready to go to work on Monday. I'm still a little weak, but I should be fine, as long as I don't overexert myself. Monday night, I picked Sabrina up at the same motel again, but it was room 146, and Ron met her at the door and let her inside. 5 minutes later, Mark arrived and entered the room. I wrote down information about Mark's car and drove home. My plan was not without some risk for me. The fact that I was willing to take the risk showed how much I wanted revenge. It was expensive, but if it delivered what I wanted, it would be the best money I've ever spent. Phone calls to friends who knew people helped me get in touch with the person I needed, and a midnight meeting in a parking lot got me what I needed to get. By the following Sunday, I was ready, and when Sabrina went to work on Monday morning, the decision was made. That evening, I followed Sabrina back to the motel, and when she and her two lovers were in room 136, I got out of the car and walked to Ron's car. The car was unlocked, so I opened the trunk and put half a pound of marijuana behind the spare tire. Mark's car was locked, so I had to use the Slim Jimmy I bought from tool retailer Snap-on to break into the car. I opened the trunk and put a pound of weed in it, then locked the car with an ounce of weed on the back bumper to give the police probable cause to search it. I drove half a block, called the police from a payphone, and reported that there was a drug purchase taking place in motel room 136, and then gave the license plates of Sabrina, Ron, and Mark. They asked my name, and I quickly said, "No way, man. I'm not going to expose myself to a bunch of Colombians," and hung up. I drove to another payphone, called all 3 local TV stations, and gave them the same information I gave the cops. The election had just passed, and the new mayor had campaigned on a war on drugs, and I knew the cops would respond quickly. The television stations knew the same thing, and they would go there to film the story. I drove another block to the 3rd payphone and called Ron and Mark's wives and told them that their husbands were in room 136 at the Seabreeze Motel with a woman, and then I drove back and parked it off to the side of the road where I could watch, and so that no one would ask about me. It only took the police 10 minutes to arrive, but it took another half hour to organize everything. A couple of patrol cars showed up first, then a SWAT van, followed by 2 unmarked cars full of plainclothes detectives. By the time the police were ready, news reporters were already on site and television vans had already arrived and were positioned. I watched as 2 SWAT officers broke down the motel room door with a battering ram and allowed 4 other SWAT officers to enter with their guns drawn. God, I wish I could be a fly on the wall and see Sabrina's face when the door collapses. 3 minutes later, Sabrina, Mark, and Ron were led out of the room in handcuffs. Mark and Ron were wearing shorts, but Sabrina was naked, with a blanket draped over her shoulders. I pressed the preset button on my cell phone and called the president of Sabrina's company. When he answered, I said, "Did you know that 3 of your middle managers are running the drug trade out of your corporate office?" I told him who they were and what was going on in Seabreeze even as we were talking. After making the same call to all 5 board members, I then drove home. When the cops searched Ron and Mark's cars, they found planted weed and an ounce of cocaine in Sabrina's purse. Under the front seat of her car, they would have found another 4 ounces. Not knowing what Ron and Mark's wives looked like, I don't know if they were in the crowd that had gathered or not, but I really hoped they were there. This story was shown on the 10 o'clock news on channels 2 and 7. I laughed when the Channel 7 presenter said, "Today, Mayor Jones began making good on his campaign promise. Police took down a large drug ring operating out of one of the city's motels. There is no news yet on how many were seized." Footage of 3 arrested drug lords was shown, and we were called upon. Follow the latest news. I turned off the TV, turned off the phone, and went to bed. I laughed when Sabrina asked me to mortgage the house so she could bail. She eventually talked her parents into putting up the money, and when she got out of jail and returned home, she found all the locks had been changed and all her belongings were stacked in boxes in the driveway. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked. "Because you are a fallen woman, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore." "But you don't understand. If you would just let me explain." "I got all the explanation I needed when I saw you being escorted out of a motel room naked on the news," and closed the door in her face. I helped her father load all her stuff into the U-Haul, but I refused to talk to him about his daughter. Sabrina called 2 or 3 times a day, but I never spoke to her. And when she showed up at my office one day, I asked security to escort her out of the building. It so happened that she, Mark, and Ron were laid off in their company, and all 3 didn't fare too well when it came to their legal troubles. Although they were convicted for the first time due to the mayor's anti-drug stance, they did not receive the probation that many other first-time offenders receive. They didn't help themselves by continuing to protest their innocence even when they were caught with the goods. Sabrina seriously harmed herself when she demanded a blood test to prove there were no drugs in her system. The test showed she was as clean as snow, allowing prosecutors to argue that this was evidence that the drugs found in her purse and car were intended for sale, not personal use. Because the mayor wanted to show immediate results from his war on drugs, the three were offered a deal: 1 year in prison and 2,000 hours of community service. If they behaved well, they could be released after 9 months. Their lawyer told them they would be fried, so they agreed to the deal. While Sabrina was behind bars, I filed for divorce, as did Ron's wife and Mark's wife. All three served their time, and when they got out, I kept an eye on them. When the time came, I went to see Mark. I later learned that he had 3 broken ribs and an arm when he arrived at the hospital emergency room. I suppose he could have pressed charges against me, but he didn't. Maybe he felt guilty for what he did. Ron and Sabrina lived together, and one evening, I caught them leaving a bar. After I finished with Ron, I turned to Sabrina and said, "Not bad for a weakling, huh? Rena, remember the Christmas party where you pleasured Ron in that little back room? Do you remember what he said? If he's as weak as you say, then we can get away with it right in front of him and get away with it. Remember?" Rena? I saw her face change as everything fell into place, and I laughed. "That's right, Rena. This weakling took revenge for your betrayal. Better call an ambulance for your boyfriend. He doesn't look that hot." She was still looking at me as I got into the car and drove away.